was like a war zone. We're literally hiding, huddled on the ground, whispering, trying to be quiet. Hey everyone, Lucy. Hi, Lucy. Say hi, Mama. Mwah. Baby. Mwah. Okay. What's up, y'all? Welcome to part 2 of Stories from the Minneapolis Uprising. Before we get started, I just want to add a few disclaimers from the last video. Well, just one in particular at least. Watching the last video back, I realized that I kept saying 4th precinct when what I really meant to say was 3rd precinct. 4th precinct is the precinct over north, and I always get them confused because 4th precinct was the one we occupied during Jamar Clark and when the protests around that event were going on. So I always get them confused, and I said 4th precinct throughout the whole video, but in reality the precinct I was talking about when I said 4th precinct was 3rd precinct. That is the one in Minneapolis on Lake Street, which is over south. Sorry about that mistake. Where I left off was day 3 of the protests, May 28th, and it was a Thursday. A lot happened this day. This was the day that essentially everything burned down. Whatever didn't burn on day 2 burned down on day 3, which included the liquor store and the auto zone. Both started on fire on the 2nd day, which was the 27th, but on day 3 they completely burned down, collapsed, as well as other grocery stores around, the Cub, the Target, Aldi's. Also, the big main event was that 3rd precinct burned down. The cops were forced to retreat and the people burnt that shit down to the ground, which is just symbolic to me of the power of the people, the power of unity, and the fact that people can overcome. The people had the power and stood strong and went up against police and won. And that was one of the most powerful things I can say that I've ever witnessed in my life. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself, so let me backtrack. Starting the beginning of day 3, as soon as I got up to 3rd precinct on that day, basically things started getting wild instantaneously. I remember I walked up there pretty early. I walked up there from my house, and this day I was not playing, okay? The day before, if you recall from the last video, and if you haven't seen the last video, I would recommend watching that first because they are in order, so I will link that in the description box below for you to check out if you haven't already. First video, I talked about how I got maced and also shot with a rubber bullet on day 2. Also day 1 I got shot too, but whatever. Day 3, right after I got maced and went through that whole experience, I was still going right back out. I probably went out close to 3 o'clock. Had to recuperate a little bit from the night before, but was right back out the next day. But I was not gonna play with them. So I got myself a gas mask. Well, I actually had one on hand, thankfully, so I brought my gas mask. I had batting gloves. I had elbow and knee pads. Okay, camo pants and a hoodie was my uniform. A bandana and a mask. We was not playing. I did not come to play. They were suited and booted up. So was I, because I was not gonna get hurt like that again. That was horrible, and I was gonna be out here regardless. So like, gotta be prepared, you know? This is what I mean when I say go prepare to a protest. The first 2 days, as I said in my last video, I was not really prepared, not as prepared as I should have been. From here on out, this was my uniform that I wore pretty much every day. Pretty much as soon as we got there, there was like cars in the Target parking lot burning. The day followed pretty much the same framework also that I described in my last video of it would kind of ebb and flow. It would get rowdy and then the officers would fire back and basically use whatever tactics to push people back away from the precinct, and then people would come back and it would just go back and forth just like that. Essentially, that was just how that night went, all the way up until the point where everything caught on fire. There was just a lot of people spread out through the whole area, so fires were just starting intermittently. People were just taking as much territory as they could in order to gain cover from the police. It was like a war zone. Like, that's pretty much the closest thing I could compare it to, because it was just like two sides fighting, strategizing. People built barricades. You have the precinct on the corner and then people are spread out throughout the street. And people had built up shields and blockages and barricades to essentially protect from the projectiles. People were hiding behind them and then throwing things over and then hiding behind them. It was literally like the trenches, you know what I mean? It was very reminiscent of, like, I don't know, I'm a history nerd, but the French Revolution, if you've ever seen Les Mis or anything like that, like building the barricade and fighting the power. Just revolution. It stirs something in my heart that there's nothing like it. I love it. It's a weird thing to call beautiful because it is very a violent experience in a way, but at the same time, there's so much beauty behind the force of the people, and that's really what just burns in me to engage in this work, you know what I mean? I'm not sure if any of that makes sense, but I can't articulate. Nothing like it. Nothing like it. I was moving all around this whole night on the front lines. I could withstand the tear gas because I had a gas mask on, but I was also with a lot of friends this day, so we were just moving around trying to make sure everyone stayed safe. People essentially took 3rd Precinct, the police were forced to retreat, and the people went in and essentially lit it on fire from the inside. After the precinct burnt down, the word that I would use to describe how it felt after that was jubilant. Everybody just broke out into celebration. People drove trucks in and were playing music from them. Black joy rang through all of the streets. It's hard to say because everything was burning around us. Everything was burning. But when the precinct burned down, everybody just erupted into celebration. You really have to see and experience to fully understand, but it was just such a powerful night. Everybody broke out into celebration. It was literally like a party in the streets. People were drunk, people were just celebrating. The most beautiful image from this night is all these black and brown people standing in front of the precinct against the backlight of the fire shining behind them with their fists up. Like, that was the most beautiful and awe-inspiring thing to witness with my own 2 eyes. This is why I have to record these stories, because nothing, no writing I could do could ever encapsulate what it meant and what it felt like to see that. I'm gonna insert some really other popular images from that night. Pretty much most of the famous images from the Minneapolis riots came out of this night, so I'll insert those here.
What are you scared of? You walk around like this every day. What are you scared of? I fucking woke up looking like this. I'm not scared. I'm gonna stay right here. You can run me over. I will die for my fucking cause. I will die for my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren. I will die for black people to fucking stop dying.
This was the evening that everybody thought I went missing. The whole night I didn't have my phone on me. Well, I had it on me, but it was off and it was in my backpack because you can't really use your phone during a riot. You know, you have to be focused, and I was in direct action, so I just didn't think to check it. There was so much chaos happening that night. There was so much going on. I was with some friends, but none of us were really on our phones. But what happened was another girl actually did get kidnapped that night. Nobody could get a hold of me, and everybody was calling each other, trying to find where I was, and nobody knew where I was. Like I said, my phone was off, so everybody was trying to find me. It was going around on Instagram, has anybody seen me? And it was so surreal, like, the next day to see my face like going around on social media as a missing person. I wasn't missing, but nobody knew where I was. And on this night, another light-skinned girl who may have looked like me did get kidnapped, or at least was reported kidnapped. And so my friends had gotten in contact with someone around the area who said that they witnessed someone get kidnapped. My friends showed them a picture of me and they were like, yep, that's her. So my friends went into panic mode and, you know, we're calling everybody. It got spread very rapidly that I was missing. It wasn't true. It wasn't me that they witnessed, but, you know, I didn't even know that it was happening and that all this was going on in the background. Everybody thought I was missing. When I finally had turned on my phone later that night, I saw all the messages and my friends got a hold of me and I told them what happened, but it was still going around on social media that I was missing for days. Even after I announced that I was safe, it went around on Snapchat, it went around on Facebook, Instagram. So it spread really widely that I was missing, but I never actually went missing. Thank God. But it could have very easily been me, which is another reason why I say to not go out alone if you go to a protest. I was not that smart on the first night when I did go alone, but then again, I wasn't really expecting it to have popped off the way it did. Day 4, which was Friday, May 29th, this was the day the National Guard was finally deployed in Minneapolis. All throughout the week earlier, they had said the National Guard was coming, and then they never came. Friday, they came. This was also the first night of the curfew, which started at 8 p.m. We were no longer at this point occupying 3rd Precinct because the National Guard was stationed there pretty heavy. This was the day right after it burned down. A lot of people had gathered at 3rd Precinct, but like I said, National Guard was a very heavy presence there, and so the people then marched from 3rd Precinct all the way to 5th Precinct, which is in Uptown. You know, it's a good little distance away, walking. Somebody drove through the crowd.
Oh shit! Oh my god!
So everybody marched and then gathered at 5th Precinct. There was not enough people. It was pretty packed initially during the day, but again, this was the first night of curfew and a lot of people were afraid of what would happen, especially with the National Guard being deployed. What would happen when curfew struck? Would everybody get arrested? Well, it got a little more intense on this day. We all wrote the bail number on our arms so that if we did get arrested, you know, we could contact someone. Mind you, each day I was out all day. This was just such an unhealthy time because I would sleep for like 5 hours, wake up, just go back out, wouldn't really be eating, wouldn't really be sleeping well. I would have nightmares. All I would hear when I would close my eyes and see were the flashbangs and people screaming. I was just up and not really nourishing my body, not really drinking water. There was no bathroom, so I would just hold it all day. So I'm just at this point running on nothing, just running on pure adrenaline. On this day, pretty much as soon as the curfew was enacted, people cleared out, which made it pretty unsafe for everybody who remained, which tended to be young black and brown people. During the day, there was a lot of white bodies outside. And then as soon as the curfew would be enacted, all the black and brown activists and youth who were still very angry, and rightfully so, were the ones left behind and left to get picked up by police and brutalized further. And that was the biggest issue that I took out of what happened after curfew was enacted. Of course, I remained outside. This night, there was just a very unsafe amount of people to be there. It wasn't enough to hold any real ground, so the people were pushed back pretty quickly. It did do the ebb and flow thing like I described before, but for the most part, we ended the night a little earlier than before. I think I went home around 2 or 3 a.m. This night, we did have to retreat to a safe house nearby. 5th Precinct isn't as close to my house and like my area as 3rd was, so I had to be a little more strategic about getting home safely. And that was pretty much day 4. I do have some footage from this night as well. It got pretty intense. The police came out full force and the National Guard was present as well.
Will be arrested.
No justice!
They're shining lights on us now.
This is the Minnesota State Patrol.
They keep playing that same recording
Full assembly.
this whole time, ever since 8 o'clock. People really dispersed, y'all. So that's what worries me right now, is people have really dispersed, but it's a lot of people that way, like further, still in the stores and stuff, but we're on the front lines. And right here. Oh, they got canisters. Run. I'm not scared of
Ah, fuck! Jesus, here we go. Where you at? Ah! Ah, where we going?
That's on fire. Oh my god.
Your gas is going back towards them! They're fucking shooting into the wind, you idiot!
So the next night, this is finally night 5, I believe. This is May 30th. On this day, we were back at 5th Precinct for another try. It was pretty peaceful until curfew. There was a lot of people during the day, and there was a lot going on during the day. This was the day that really started everything for the grassroots community organization that I started with a bunch of other really dope Minneapolis and St. Paul youth activists. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can visit us at peoplesprotectioncoalition.org or on Instagram at People's Protection Coalition. You'll be hearing more about that in the next video. But this was pretty much what started that. On this day, we were trying to be more prepared because, like I said, the night before, there was not enough people and it was pretty much dispersed a lot more quickly than the nights before. People were trying to get more prepared than they had been the day before. One thing that myself and my friends that I was with were trying to do was build up a medical supply hub and create a fortified area in which we could centralize medical supplies and that our street medics could work inside of in order to provide care to people in need in case of emergency and not have to worry about getting hit by projectiles, because that was one of the major problems throughout this whole series of nights, was that the street medics would be trying to help victims who had been shot by projectiles or been maced like I had been affected by tear gas, and the street medics would try to help them and then become victims themselves and get hit with projectiles or get maced or tear gassed or whatever. So we were trying to build up a fortified safe zone for the medics to work in. I, on this day, came with a megaphone. Like I said in my last video, I have a lot of protest experience, so I have a lot of protest supplies on hand. And so I had the ability to kind of put this idea on blast, and basically I ran through the whole area on this megaphone directing people to help build up the area and also to place their supplies, because there was a lot of people donating supplies or looking to donate supplies to help out for when things got popping at night. We were directing people there. I was on the megaphone pretty much the whole afternoon just trying to get it built up. People really came out and did that. There was a construction area nearby and people were breaking up fences to use plywood. It was like a makeshift hospital that the people had just came up with in like 15-20 minutes. This is what I'm talking about, the power of unity and the power of the people. It's just something amazing. So we had built that up, and then curfew hit. 8 p.m. leading up to curfew, there was kind of a rally that got set up. People were passing the mic and speaking. People were urging everyone to stand their ground and just remain peacefully sitting on the street when the curfew came, whether the police came out or not. People were just sitting on the ground, fists up, peacefully demonstrating, and as soon as 8 p.m. struck, the police came out full force. They began instantly throwing tear gas canisters into a crowd of people sitting. This crowd contained children, this crowd contained elders who had a difficult time being able to just get out. They instantly fired tear gas canisters, which are also lit. Not only are they a gas, but they're also lit on fire, so into just a crowd of people sitting on the ground. Of course, there was a stampede for everybody to get out. People were trampled, people were running, and people were panicked, trying to get away from the gas and the projectiles. So one thing characteristic of this evening was that the police, pretty much every night preceding this night, just had the less lethal projectiles, which is rubber bullets. On this night, they had real guns, and you know they have real guns because they shine the red laser, and the projectile guns don't have those. They were shining red lasers from blocks away down at us. And so a lot of people were forced to hide and take cover because
hello?
We tried to stand our ground as best as we could, but essentially they pushed us back so quickly. The medical center that we had built up got completely raided. All the supplies were destroyed. There were so many supplies, and they just didn't even recognize it as a safe zone. Not at all. They didn't take heed to anybody. They just took it completely and pushed us all the way back to Kmart. In this kind of melee of everybody rushing around, a lot of people had regrouped and were still trying to hold their ground. Essentially, we got pushed back pretty much throughout the city because they kept pushing us back. They had trapped us under this like bridge, and it just got weird because some people wanted to go this way, some people wanted to go this way. It just got wild. Everybody kind of split up and ended up in a different area. People reconvened to, I think, try to march elsewhere. I don't really remember the details how we got back over to a whole different area. I think it just turned into a march. One way or another, we got all the way to the area of Cedar Riverside. We had marched. There was just a lot going on. I was with a decent sized group of people. We got to this point where there was just an unsafe number of people, and people continued to march in just opposite directions and would break off, and the group just got smaller and smaller and smaller. And my friends and I were like, yeah, this is not really a safe area to be in, and not this many people, and the cops could pull up on us at any time. We had to get back over south because that's where people had parked, and we were trying to figure out, you know, all the details of how to get home. And we squatted on the grass in this cut to kind of figure out the details, and all of a sudden we saw police lights. Everybody pretty much stop breathing because we're all decked out in riot gear essentially. Like I said, I had my uniform on, gas mask. We just looked like trouble to the police, you know what I mean? We're sitting on the grass and this police car pulls up, but we're kind of hidden. First of all, it's dark and we were kind of hidden by like some bushes, I think, or like the corner of a building. So we quickly rush behind the building and we're literally hiding from the police. And I peek around the corner and the police are right there and they're shining their light basically on where we just were, scanning to see who's out there. We're literally hiding, huddled on the ground, whispering, trying to be quiet. And I went live at this time, so I have some footage from this that I will insert here. We were hiding from the police.
They're right there. Shh, hush, hush, hush. Stop moving. Do not move if you can help it. They're searching.
Down that way, but we gotta go.
Okay. They park right next to us. They can't see us right now, but we need to fucking find a different way and move because they were shining their lights.
They didn't end up seeing us or hearing us, so they ended up leaving. Had called our friend to come pick us up, but we had to have her wait some blocks away until they left because it wasn't safe for us to run back out around the corner because they would have caught us. The final night that I'm going to talk about in this video is Sunday, May 31st. And this was the day of the US Bank Stadium protest. Everybody met during the day at US Bank Stadium, and this was a huge protest turnout. There was so many people.
We took the whole city, y'all, and there's more people behind me.
Everybody met at US Bank Stadium during the day and then marched, and I forget where the march was going, but it got cut short. And the reason it got cut short was because a gas truck, yes, a gas truck, drove through the crowd on 35W bridge. People were panicked. People were running and screaming. I was on the bridge when it happened. People pretty much panicked and the march split up, and then one half of the march kind of went one way. The group that I was with had to continue across the bridge and then looped back around and met back up at US Bank Stadium. And one big thing that really went overlooked about this day and about that event was that the people who stopped the truck driver and got into the cabin of the truck and pulled him out also got his phone. And they had his phone when we reconvened back at US Bank Stadium, and they read the text messages from the lock screen of his phone out loud on the megaphone to the crowd. Essentially, the messages were very incriminating and they showed intent. I can't remember word for word what they said, but they said something like, "You're the only one who would be willing to do it." Something along those lines. I don't want to misquote it, but it was very incriminating and pretty much confirmed that this was an intentional violent act. This was the day that PPC began to be mobilized, People's Protection Coalition. Earlier in the day, I was at Cup Foods, or 38th Chicago, George Floyd Square, whatever you want to call it, the sacred space where Mr. Floyd was murdered. I was sitting on the corner and somebody had came up to me and recognized me from the day before when I had been on the megaphone trying to organize the medic unit, and we talked a little bit, and essentially she asked me, "What are you going to do next?" because I had told her about what happened with the medic zone being raided, and I was like, oh, what do I have planned next? I hadn't really thought about it, but then I was like, we're gonna create a mobile medic unit, and I just said that, and the idea came to me to try and create this mobile medic unit wouldn't be just overtaken so quickly. That was the original starting point of People's Protection Coalition, was to create a People's Emergency Medical Vehicle and First Aid Vehicle. But it didn't really turn out to be that, because by the time we were able to get a bus, which I will talk about in my next video, it wasn't really a need because the protests had kind of begun to die down. We had to kind of reassess what we were going to do there. But that was the original starting point idea for People's Protection Coalition. I was out around, but pretty much that was the only major event that happened on that day. After that, it kind of just got spread out and I just bounced around to different areas. That kind of marked the last big day of really organized protests. From that point on, the main centralized location kind of became 38th in Chicago, and it wasn't really a protest space, it was more of just a communal space that people gathered at. There was a couple nights of protests, you know, intermittently following, but this pretty much marked the end of the real riots in Minneapolis. There was still, you know, National Guard presence for days, and weeks later, this was kind of the ending point of all of the direct action going on. That's pretty much it for this video before it gets too long. This was the 28th through the 31st of May 2020. In part 3, I will be talking a little bit more about what happened after all of the direct action and the riots kind of subsided. I think I got everything within these 4 days. I hope I didn't leave anything out. There was just so much going on. It's hard to remember and encapsulate everything, but I think that's all for the major events that went on these 4 nights. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to like, share, subscribe. Stay tuned for part 3. That should be coming out pretty soon, hopefully. In the comments below, I want to hear your stories. If you have any stories that you can contribute to where you were at during this, if you were in Minneapolis during all this time, what is your experience? I would love to know. If you are in a different city and you experienced any type of riots, I want to hear your story. So include your stories in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and stay tuned for part 3. Mwah!